right, good afternoon, everyone. We'll call to order the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals regular meeting for November 21st, 2022. First item on our agenda is a determination of a quorum with all 5 members here present today. We do have a quorum. Next, we'll move to minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes, one from July 27th, 2022, and then September 28th, 2022. Those minutes were provided. Are there any changes necessary to those? I'm sorry, Matthews.
Chairman Young, I just noticed a typo on the agenda. That September 28th should say October 26th.
Okay.
So if we could substitute October 26th for September 28th. And the October 26th minutes were correctly included in your agenda materials, so that's just a typo on the agenda page itself.
On page 2 of the October
Says
minutes,
July
so
27th.
it says September.
July
So-
27th.
Oh, it says on page, I thought it said September, and then when I
It
got.
does. I see that too.
Yeah.
We'll get that corrected.
So that,
July 27th on the minutes, yeah.
Can those be approved at?
Yeah, I think just
Corrections.
approve, and if you all could do it with a motion, just to approve, it's been specifically state the dates of the minutes, and then with the correction to the October 26th minutes that the date on the second page is corrected.
I so move.
Second.
Way to go. Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so the minutes have been approved with those couple of changes. Next, we'll move to old business. We have a reconsideration of a special use permit. Application Z22024 by Larry and Betty Oliver to reconsider a previously approved special use permit establishing an accessory apartment in a single-family residential RS8 zone. This is for property located at 411 4th Avenue in order to modify the current conditions of approval. Matthew, are you presenting this?
Can I interject something first? After reading the presentation, with me being an employee of Wilson Bank and Trust, I noticed they were noted in here as a lien holder on this property. I feel it best just to avoid any appearance of conflict that I'm not going to participate on the vote or the discussion on the motion.
Mr. Hankins, you had read in Robert's Rules of Order regarding who all or what number of participants from the previous vote needed to participate in order to.
Yes, yeah, we can go ahead and have that discussion now as far as the proper motion and procedure for what this agenda item is going to be. It's listed on the agenda as a reconsideration and a modification. The proper motion, if y'all decide to amend it today, would be a motion to amend. And as Matthew will explain, I think staff is seeking to remove the condition that the special use permit lapse upon transfer of the property. So the motion would be to remove that particular restriction. Since this was what Robert's Rules calls previously noticed, as in it's on the agenda for today, that can be done by a majority of the members present and voting. So, Mr. Tips, your abstention should not affect the majority vote, the vote tally for the motion.
Well, as another question, wouldn't a reconsideration require a motion to reconsider?
Yes, it would require a motion to reconsider. However, in studying both Robert's Rules and the BZA Rules of Procedure, motions to reconsider generally can only happen at the same meeting. Robert's Rule says that they can happen in subsequent meetings on the same legislative session. However, the BZA Rules of Procedure specifically state motions for reconsideration can only take place at the same meeting. Therefore, the proper motion here is not one to reconsider. It would be a motion to amend something previously adopted.
Okay. And so nothing is materially changing about Mr. and Mrs. Oliver's application. After we were reviewing the conditions of approval from the vote last month, one of the conditions that we had recommended was our standard deed restriction on the property. And one of the reasons we started recommending that condition of approval and the board started started approving accessory apartments based on that condition was to put future property owners on notice of the restrictions of the use on that accessory apartment. And so as we were contemplating the additional condition that was added about the special use permit lapsing upon transfer of the property, we began to run into a few logistical issues and a little bit of a conflict with the condition regarding the deed restriction. And, and the intention of the deed restriction, one of the intentions of the deed restriction, as I mentioned, is to put future property owners on notice. And although the expiration or lapsing of that special use permit upon transfer of the property is an option that the board has at its disposal, that would be a very difficult condition to enforce because we would not be put on notice when that property transfers to another individual or another entity. And so we would be put in the position of a likely violation down the road if someone was not aware of those restrictions or were not made aware of those restrictions by the seller. And I think, and we wouldn't know when the property transfers. So what would possibly end up happening is someone could be using it in violation, and we would have no way of knowing that they were using it in violation because we would not know that the property transferred. Whereas putting the restrictive covenant on the property puts people on notice of how it may be used, and if people are violating the conditions of the special use permit, then that would be a violation. But at least they would have the right to continue using it as the current property owners were given that right by the Board of Zoning Appeals. Another thing, if the property transfers, that would trigger physical improvements to the site or physical modifications to the accessory apartment so that it didn't have all the elements of an accessory apartment. Once again, if we're not made aware that the property transfers, then we can't move forward in making someone change the physical characteristics of that accessory apartment. So it just presents some logistical issues, and that's the reason why we are bringing this before you today to request that you amend the conditions of the special use permit to remove the condition that the special use permit lapse upon transfer of the property, but all other conditions that the special use permit was approved with last month, we would recommend that those conditions still stand. Mr. Hankins has already been working with the applicants and has the deed restriction ready to be signed and recorded if you concur with staff's recommendation. No public hearing is necessary for this amendment.
Will this change apply to other instances where we've used it before? Is this, I guess, something going forward for all of them?
Now, I think that this is something that for accessory apartments is specifically a little bit difficult to administer. I think that there are instances where the special use permit lapsing upon transfer of the property, may not be as problematic is not the right word, but we have the stopgap in place of the deed restriction, and that's one of the reasons why we've included that over the years, is so that future property owners know how they must use it to keep it consistent with the approval of the special use permit.
Okay. Any other questions for staff?
Mr. Hankins, if I was not here on the original vote, does that affect this vote at all? Can I still vote?
You can vote on the motion to amend. And I was going to say to say one more point to Mr. Tips' previous question too. Motions to reconsider, just for future reference, generally must be made by someone who was on the prevailing side of the vote, which I think is what you were thinking about. So in that sense, it would have been one of Mr. Halliburton, Mr. Young, or Mr. Tips. But since we're doing a previously noticed motion to amend that expands a right of a property owner in this instance, reviewing Robert's rules and the BZA's rules, I think any member present can make the motion and vote on the motion.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion that we approve the amendment with the, according to all staff comments, along with the deed restriction being added.
And would that include the removal of the condition that the special use permit lapse upon transfer of the property?
Yes.
Mr. Hankins, is that the proper motion?
Yes, yes, and just to restate, if I understand it, since the restrictive covenant was previously a staff comment, I understand that your motion is to approve it, subject to all staff comments, and removing the previous condition that it lapse upon transfer. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There are none, so that request has been approved. Next, we'll move to new business. There's one special use permit amendment request, application Z22025 by Mr. Clyde Roundtree of Huddleston Steel Engineering, representing Enterprise Holdings. They're requesting an amendment to an existing special use permit for a motor vehicle sales and rental facility, in this case automobiles, on property in the CH Commercial Highway District, located along the south side of Franklin Road and along the west side of Bob Kelly Drive. This is identified as 3019 Franklin Road. The previous special use permit was approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals on February 26, 2020. The amendment to the special use permit pertains to the expansion of the motor vehicle sales and rental facility on the southern portion of the subject property for the sale and or rental of trucks. Mr. Ballin, if you'd review this for us.
Thank you, Chairman Young. I'll present in place of Mr. Barbie, who's off today, but he did the work on this application and reviewed it. So this is an application to amend the special use permit that was approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals in February of 2020 for motor vehicle sales and rental. It's located at the southwest corner of Franklin Road and Bob Kelly Drive. Bob Kelly Drive is the southern extension south of Franklin Road of Gresham Lane, the southern extension of Gresham Lane. There's a racetrack directly opposite Bob Kelly Drive from the subject property. Enterprise was approved for a special use permit back in February of 2020 for motor vehicle sales and rental, and they have since had a site plan approved and are currently working, physically constructing the improvements on the property right now. When they came to the Planning Commission for site plan approval, they actually shrunk what they were proposing to build a little bit from what they had taken to the Board of Zoning Appeals in early 2020. And now what they're doing is the southern portion of the site, they're bringing that back to you today with a little bit of a modified plan than what was brought before you a few years ago. The southern portion of the site they're proposing to use primarily for truck rental, and so truck rental would fall under the same category, motor vehicle sales and rental of automobiles. And so they have presented their application materials showing how they meet all of the standards for special use permits for this particular use. Staff believes that they have met the burden of proof and are proposing to design their site in a way to minimize impacts on adjacent properties. To the south and to the west, there are single-family residential uses in the unincorporated county. So if you recall, back in 2020, approval was conditioned upon a type E buffer, which is a 20-foot wide, our most intense landscape buffer, 20 feet wide, be provided along the south and west lot lines, along with a privacy fence and an earthen berm. So the board really tried to protect those existing single-family residential uses back in 2020 by providing that landscape buffer, berm, and fence along those two property lines. They are not proposing to modify that buffering plan. They are, once again, showing the type E buffer and the berm and the fence. I'll bring up there's a photo of the existing site work on the property right now under construction. And so here is what they're proposing on the southern portion of the site. You'll see that here, as opposed to it stubbing into the southern lot line, they're actually building a kind of a half cul-de-sac there. Access would be limited to just the access points from the previous plan, no additional access points into the site. This is a proposed hand wash building for the trucks. Not proposed to be a mechanized wash facility, just a hand wash building. And you can see the different sizes of trucks. They'll have spaces for different sizes of trucks that they'll be renting on the property. You'll see here noted the 20-foot buffer, the 3-foot berm, and Mr. Barbie vetted the application, and it meets all the minimum parking requirements, all the separation requirements. There is a separation requirement of the building where any service activities are going to happen. Must be at least 100 feet from any adjacent residential property lines. That building is at least 100 feet from either of those two property lines, so it's meeting that standard. If the board votes to approve this request, staff recommends the following conditions. I'll read those out loud into the record. Number one, a site plan application shall be submitted to the planning department for review and approval. The site plan set shall include architectural elevations and demonstrate compliance with all requirements of the zoning ordinance and design guidelines and conditions of the approval or the original approval of the special use permit. Operating hours will be limited to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The applicant will provide, maintain, and ensure the use of the 25-foot by 150-foot loading zone, space for the loading and unloading of vehicles only. This loading space may not be used for parking, inventory storage, or any other use. And it's something that we always stress to motor vehicle sales businesses that they are required to have that loading and unloading space. As many do not adhere to that and end up unloading in the public right-of-way. So we do our best on the front end to ensure that that's not going to happen. Vehicles shall be loaded and unloaded within the 25 by 150 loading and unloading area designated on the site plan. No loading or unloading of vehicles is permitted within any public right-of-way. So we're being doubly sure there, I guess. Number 5, no storage or display of any vehicle shall take place on any landscaped or lawn areas. Again, another kind of chronic problem that we have with motor vehicle sales uses around the city. Number 6, as described by the applicant, the maintenance building will be for hand washing of vehicles only. The addition of automated equipment will require an amendment to the special use permit. And number 7, all conditions of the previous special use permit approval will still apply, and a copy of those conditions are attached in your packet for reference. Be happy to read those, or if you like as well.
Thank you, Matthew. Was this southern portion, the original plan, was it being developed up to the berm, and that, I guess, what triggered the change that now it needs to be amended?
It was, they had shown on their plan back in 2020 the development of that area, but the layout has changed a little bit. And I think they're proposing mostly truck rental in this area, so it was just a little bit of a different plan. And so even though they did submit development for this area on the southern portion back in 2020, we figured better, as a belts and suspenders approach, Chairman Young, that we take it back to you for review and approval.
Okay.
And Mr. Roundtree is here, as is a representative from Enterprise, if you have any questions for them. And I'll be happy to answer any questions before or after our public hearing.
Thank you. Any questions for staff at this point?
Just one. Given that this is a commercial highway zone, but those other properties around it are residential, have y'all had any feedback from these property owners
I have not personally received any feedback. We did send the notices to the surrounding property owners, and I don't know if anybody is here to speak about it today, but I personally have not spoken with any of the neighbors.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Roundtree, anything you'd like to add to the application? All right, if there's no comments there, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone that's present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you'd come forward, give us your name and address, and you can provide us any comments you may have. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for any further discussion or motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would go ahead and move for approval of this amended request to the special use permit that was initially approved back in 2020 with the changes and conditions cited by Mr. Blumley in his comments.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? There are none, so that application has been approved. Next item, staff reports and other business.
I have none, except to wish all of you a happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we will adjourn.